Hello, everybody. Um, so yeah, as the title suggests, I guess we skipped over the title. What I'd like to talk about today is a little bit about the difference between the Cardano protocol versus the Cardano network and what that even means and what are some of the implications for us and how we might go about improving one thing versus the other thing. So I hope you're having a good weekend and yeah, I think what I'm going to do is just draw with my mouse in a little Google Note thing. So, I sometimes we kind of talk about these things interchangeably, and I think I have been too for the past couple days. There's been a little bit of a Twitter controversy going on, but I it's kind of important to point out that they are actually two different things, and I think it actually gets a little bit to the heart of some of the discussion that we're having and why some people are invested in this discussion. So I apologize for the bad handwriting because, like I said, I'm using my mouse. But when we talk about the protocol, what are we talking about? We're talking about the actual, I guess the design spec first of all for what is Cardano, and that's about all the kind of papers, peer-reviewed papers, and then there's the implementation of those papers into Haskell, right? And the repositories and all this kind of different things that are existing around there. And that, I'd like to point out, is actually distinct from the network, right? What is the network? So the network is, in one way of thinking about it, which I think is actually kind of convenient, it's the actual, nodes, which are, block producers and relays, which are using the protocol and are running a specific version of the chain, right? And this is kind of maybe most easily exemplified by the, there's various test nets that are also running the same protocol or very similar versions of the protocol, incrementally improved versions of the protocol. You or I or anybody could spin up a new version of a Cardano blockchain with a new Genesis file, right? And we would be running the same protocol, but it would be a totally different network, right? And so and I think a lot of other people, hi James, just saw your little chat, are really excited about what Cardano is at the protocol level, right? It's a peer-reviewed blockchain written in a functionally pure programming language, Haskell, and it, very, very thorough and very well implemented, and constantly improving. And there's been a little bit of discussion this week as it relates to not, I think, the protocol, but the network. And of course, these are both part of some kind of larger ecosystem of, what we colloquially refer to as like Cardano and all these kind of things. And there's like people in here too, right? Personalities and whatnot. But the reason I'm bringing this up is that, I just want to make clear that, let's see, I could have practiced this beforehand, but we'll do this live. Protocol, super cool, super exciting, right? Network, it's decent, right? But there's definitely some ways of improving it, and this is distinct from the protocol. That makes sense. So what do we mean by that, right? Like we can have this beautiful, perfect protocol, but if it's running on a substandard network, then it doesn't really matter because like let's say that I think we touched on this a little bit. Let's say there was one pool, right, being run out of someone's basement or garage, what have you, and skip over for a second the fact that it's not decentralized at all, but like it's just one pool. If when the network goes down, when his internet goes down, his or her internet goes down, that network is taken offline and you can't do any transactions on it. You can't do any, useful work with it because it's uncertain as to its uptime and various things. And so when we're talking about decentralization and we're talking about like having a robust network, one of the exciting parts of a decentralized kind of blockchain is this kind of robust behavior that is impervious to either individuals' will or actions, and also impervious to local events like natural disasters or internet outages or things like that, right? And so when you have all these people on both sides of the issue about like multi-pools and this kind of thing, people aren't just getting their panties in a bunch over decentralization for decentralization's sake. People are very invested in this idea of decentralization because blockchains are actually, at least right now, relatively inefficient compared to centralized systems when it comes to throughput and kind of efficiency. And so you're making trade-offs by running this system in a distributed way, and in order for those trade-offs to make sense, you have to get something in return for them, right? And usually that thing that you're getting in return is trustlessness, the ability to not have to trust the person on the other side, the ability to be resilient against local events, the ability to be resilient against individual human behaviors or individual human decisions. And so I just want to be clear here that when we talk about Cardano, I think usually we're talking about all this. But I think a lot of the discussion in the past, week or two on Twitter has been specifically, at least from my perspective, on the pool splitting argument. It's been about how those decisions are affecting this, right? The network side of things. And with the idea that if this thing is weak, if this is not in, peak physical or network condition, then it doesn't really matter how great a protocol we have. So I hope that makes sense. Yeah, that's the main thing I wanted to talk about, but I don't know if there's other ways of thinking about this or addressing this. James, am I making sense? And we got my buddy in chat. So the other part of this is that I guess we drew this. There's people and there's applications, right? And the reason I'm putting these on another axis is perhaps a network and a protocol without people who use it for something is similarly meaningless, right? Because even if we have a great protocol and a great network, if there are no users of it, who cares? And if those users can't do anything on it, who cares? Right? So I think that I've tried to be and tried to make clear, and I'm a little bit surprised actually at in some of the Telegram chats and the Twitter feeds, I've tried as much as possible to preface multiple times that the opinions that I'm expressing are in no ways like ad hominem attacks against the people who are espousing the opposite viewpoint. I've done that in several ways by both supporting, and wishing people good luck, wishing people, that they have success in their business endeavors, And I don't want to come between any person and their money and their income, right? But I do want to make clear that sometimes what people are doing may have a negative impact on either the network or the protocol or the applications involved. And so, that's interesting. But I don't know. It's interesting to me because, like I said in a previous stream, I come from the architecture discipline, which is a design discipline. We build building, or we don't build buildings. We design buildings, and at least in the discipline where I'm come from, we're very comfortable uh, being super critical to each other. There's something about studio culture or crits where you sit down and you are brutally honest with other people, because the idea is if you're not, then you're really just holding people back from developing and becoming better. And so I guess one of the things I've observed in my time in switching into a more engineering discipline is that a lot of engineers, I think due to the scarcity of, programmers that are available right now, they have little mini god complexes and they don't like to be challenged because there's always the ability for them to just, pack their bags up and get a new job someplace else that pays, a ton of money. And so why would they put up with criticism? And I think that's unfortunate because, at least with the engineers that I've really enjoyed working with, they tend to be more open to criticism and improvement. And myself too, right? Like if you do something stupid, then should you'd benefit from someone pointing that out. And of course, there's cordiality involved, and there's ways of making things nicer. But I don't personally think that I've been attacking anyone personally or being a dick to people. So throw that up there. Where are we on 3? I'm bringing this up right now because I'm just checking this out. All right, this is an interesting little thread going on here. So what is this guy saying? When an SPO splits their pools and makes a pool farm or a multi-pool, are they taking stake from other community pools or from exchanges and IOG? To be fair, it's always going to be both. Maybe try to reframe the question. And, I pointed out that that's not really the case, because the set of people who are staking is not the same set of people who are leaving their money on exchanges, their ADA on exchanges, right? And, Raymond has agreed. He probably misunderstood the question. So I guess this point doesn't really make sense anymore. And he even says that it's obviously the side of the community pools because of the user experience. And there's a sense of accomplishment in, quote, figuring out how to stake that, I think it'd be like, I think I've said this somewhere else too. It's like you learn how to ride a bike and then you put training wheels back on. I can't imagine that happening, right? And so the point is that the whole point of the K increase in K doesn't do anything to Binance. Binance is going to spin up, twice as many pools to do it, and everyone knows they are, and everyone expects them to do it. So why is IOG putting in the parameter change to do this? Right. The only possible intended consequence that I can think of is to force people to have to redelegate. And hopefully when they redelegate, they consider what and how they're doing. People do not like that. I'm reading the comments in YouTube. Interesting. Exactly. So, as I think Ray points out, the SPO is faced with splitting or fee raising to maintain the same amount of income. And that's what's been said numerous times in other places, is that all these big pool operators who that's probably the thread I want to get to, who are faced with the decision to how to maintain their income, they can do that perfectly fine by raising fees. And I still have not seen a single rebuttal in any place as to why they are avoiding raising fees. And I kind of point out the hypocrisy of that a little bit, or let's use a nicer phrase, the lack of rigor that goes along with claiming that you're offering a superior staking service while at the same time charging average or below average costs for that service. Because a common kind of principle in business would be to charge what you're worth. And if you do think you have a superior product, it would follow that you would expect to receive, larger percent of margin to go along with that. But these people who are splitting pools tend to have average or below average fees, and they don't seem interested in exploring the pricing space for that. So I suggested, if you're going to have 8 pools, have one pool at a higher fee and then the next higher fee and the next higher fee, and allow, for some kind of gradated fee scale, and charge explain to them that, oh, if you're on the 8% fee server, or the 4 or 5 even, then you're getting access to all these relays that we run, and super beefy block producer. So my main concern at this point right now is that there's actually could be this unintended consequence that if all the big pool operators are splitting, then the main people who are going to get hurt by this could be the pools that are running with between 32 million and 64 million stake, and for either ethical or their principles, they choose not to spin up a second pool. And I actually it'd be interesting. I probably will do some little analysis. How many pools are in this space where you had someone who was at 48 million stake or 50 million stake, and now because there are K is going to 1,000, the most they can have is 32 million. There's, depending on the distribution of stake among pools, there's actually a scenario in which all these pools are now capped at 32 million. Their stake goes someplace else. The excess stake over 32 million goes someplace else. And the pools that are at 64 million plus, meaning like they have multiple pools running, they just double the number of pools they have, and that causes the decentralization of the network to go down, right? So that's something else I brought up in another location, and be interesting to see if someone does the math on that, or the analysis. And again, I totally agree with what Ray is saying, is that we shouldn't be trusting anyone. I don't understand this desire to latch on to human personalities in crypto space, right? Like, is it what is driving that? And it really made clear to me, like, what was the power of Bitcoin being produced by a pseudonymous individual, right? It doesn't make sense. And I disagree with Rick again here. I don't think I'm being a dick to Ray. I think Ray and I have discussed this in several forums, and I have actually defended Ray in some of the single pool operator channels, or even Rick in some of the other channels, that like they're not bad people. They're just doing what they think is best. And all I'm trying to do is to engage them into a discussion on why they're choosing to split pools, or rather, not they, why Rick is choosing to split pools rather than to raise fees, and the kind of falseness of Ray's stance in choosing to, quote, stay neutral, because he, I've shown logically how what he's saying and what he's espousing is inconsistent with a neutral position. So that's that. A little bit slower today. I don't think I've had a coffee yet. We got in the chat. So that's kind of what I have to say about network, protocol, and people. There was also this other thing that happened. There's one last thing I think I want to address, if there's no more comments, is that there's a lot of narrative going around that people who are criticizing this action are just salty because they're small and they're not big. And I definitely think there could be an element of that, that I think one of the ways I tried to defend Rick in one of these channels was to say that, how many of you guys wouldn't do the same if the shoe was on the other foot, if you didn't have, or if you had 4 pools that were fully saturated almost, and K was increasing, right? I think for most people that would be a default kind of easy choice to try to maintain revenue. And the point I'm trying to make here is that we're not necessarily just attacking big pools, because there are pools like Eden who are doing something a little bit different, and I would say actually are offering something of value to their delegators, which is maintaining this higher pledge than normal. And that if these guys were to open up another 3 pools at 10 million pledge, that would actually probably have a net lowering effect on the leverage of the network. And so would it be good for decentralization? From the perspective of accumulating stake in one location, no. But you could make the argument that versus a normal typical small pool operator with 100,000 pledge ish, and like a couple million in ADA stake, that small pool operator has more leverage than a large pool operator with a 10 million pledge and 64 million stake. So from that perspective, it could actually be that they have not as much of a multiplier on their influence on the protocol, or on the network, sorry. Right? Just to drive that point home. Anybody can use the Cardano protocol to spin up a blockchain, right? And so the protocol by itself does not have much inherent value. We could start up, what's another one? We could start up like a Pastor chain or something like that, right? And it could have all the features of Cardano, and we could try to convince people to join the network. And we could have an alternate network that was run purely by multiple pool farmers, right? Where everyone had 8 pools and full stake, and you could compare that against another chain which had a more distributed stake, and you could ask, which one of those networks and which one of those ecosystems is more appealing to develop on. And that is kind of the essence of what we're getting at, because maybe this is a good thing. We have other protocols. How should I do this? Can I zoom out? There's another protocol over here. We'll just shorten that to P on another network. And maybe their protocol is not as good as Cardano's, right? Cardano has a better protocol. But if they have a more robust network, you know, more distributed validator nodes or pools or even miners, if they figure out a great way to efficiently somehow do mining, then the one thing that I'm concerned about that I hear a lot is like people are talking as if criticizing the network or the people in the chain is detrimental to the project. And that's only true if you kind of view Cardano as being in a isolated vacuum, free from competition of other chains and other networks and other people, right? And I don't think being in a circle jerk is conducive to pushing this whole ecosystem forward and trying to make it as strong as it can be, because the space that we're in is one that is full of competition and innovation. And so, you know, if someone else has a, you know, a good enough protocol and a much more robust network, who's to say that the market doesn't decide that that's the thing to go with, right? So, you know, sandbag the development and the not equity, but the robustness of a distributed network as much as you want, and make claims to personality. But no one outside of Cardano gives a fuck about the little tiny individual personalities that are sitting in this network, right? Rick or I or any of the, you know, individuals here are not even do not even factor in to the discussion of the comparison between Polkadot and Cardano or these other things, right? This gets all reduced to a number, which is like, how many validators do you have? How many, how distributed is the stake, right? These kind of things. So what's the hash rate of the network? What's the throughput of the network? So, you know, if people choose to get hung up on these small things, like the personalities of the individuals who are running nodes on it, and, you know, I guess that's their choice, but it seems rather short-sighted to me, because I just don't think that that is a significant differentiator from one chain to the next. And I'm in this, I think, for the long haul. I'd like for Cardano to be, you know, a successful, I'm not a maximalist. I don't think it has to be the only, but it would be great for it to be one of the dominant players in the space. And for that to happen, I think it does need a resilient, robust network full of individuals running this beautiful protocol, right? And the other piece that we have to do is we have to develop applications that are valuable to people. So I hope that can happen, right? And I hope that the community can figure out how to have a difficult but necessary conversation with each other that doesn't devolve into factionalism and, you know, us versus them. So that's all I have to say about that. I hope you enjoy your weekend, and I'll try to be a little bit more high energy next time, but I think I'm a kind of sleepy Eeyore, so we'll call that. Bye-bye.